The Muslim Moral Tradition, an Introduction and Landscape. Islam is second only to Christianity in the number of its adherents. It is projected to surpass Christianity in this regard within the next 50 years. In this country, most people think of Muslims as being Middle Eastern. A quick look at the green map shows that Islam predominates not only in the Middle East, but also North Africa, Eastern Europe, Asia, and parts of Southeast Asia. It also is worth noting that the largest population of Muslims is in Indonesia. A couple of takeaways from this is that not only are the stereotypical ideas of what Muslims are like woefully inadequate, but that the Muslim world is as diverse and varied as any that one will find anywhere else. A bit of a vocabulary. Islam. This is a Latinized Arabic word for one who submits to the will of Allah. It is also related to the word salam, which some may recognize as the Hebrew word shalom, that is, peace. Arabic and Hebrew are both Semitic languages, so similarities are to be expected. Muslim, also a Latinized Arabic word for submission. Allah, the name of God. Etymologically, this is related to the Hebrew word Elohim. Quran. This is God's revelation, in particular, God's revelation to Muhammad as mediated by the angel Gabriel. Two things to note. Allah's utter transcendence and majesty are extremely important within Islam. So not even Allah's prophets have direct access. It is also worth mentioning that Muslims maintain that the messages from God to prior prophets, such as Adam, Noah, Moses, and Jesus, became corrupted. So great care is taken to preserve the text of the Quran to such an extent that only the Arabic text is permitted to be treated as the Quran. Muhammad. Muhammad is Allah's last prophet. Surahs. These are chapters. The Quran is arranged not topically, chronologically, or narratively. In his final days, Muhammad is said to have dictated how the surahs were to be arranged according to their own internal logic. This can make things difficult for first-time readers to make much sense of what goes on from surah to surah, but Islam has a remedy for this. The Hadith and Sunnah. Here is where you will find a narrative and commentary on the Quran. This is extremely useful when interpreting the text. Hijr. This is the migration to Medina. It is the beginning of the Muslim community, which is also known as the Ummah. The 5 pillars. These are the 5 fundamental practices within Islam. Jihad. Jihad is a word that simply means struggle, and we will look at this in a bit more detail. Sharia. This is the law as interpreted from the Quran. Please note that Sharia is not a single body of work. What is considered Sharia law can vary from community to community. The 5 pillars of Islam. These would include the Shahada, which is faith. It is the declaration that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is Allah's messenger. Salat, which is prayer. Prayer is prescribed 5 times daily for Muslims. You may have also noted that the practice is to face east towards Mecca when praying. Zakat, almsgiving. Muslims are expected to contribute 2 1.5% of one's wealth to assist the poor. Shon, fasting. This is the 40-day observance of Ramadan, ending with the feast of Eid al-Fitr. I'm sorry, I did pronounce that not quite right. Hajj. This is the pilgrimage to Mecca. When looking at the 5 pillars, what do you notice? Perhaps that only one of them is anything close to a statement of faith or a creed. The rest have to do exclusively as to how one lives one's life, how one practices being a Muslim. Okay, so now let's look at jihad. Jihad is actually more complicated than one might think. It is outlined in the following way. The jihad of the tongue, which is the struggle to spread the message of Islam. The jihad of the hands, the hard physical work of promoting strong communities, that is, the ummah. The jihad of the heart, the struggle within life to do the right thing. This is known as the greater jihad. The jihad of the sword, and this means struggle or battle to discern the correct action within the public sphere of implementing one's belief with courage. It is the ordering of the public sphere in accordance to the will of Allah. This can range anywhere from social justice to just war. Perhaps the most common way non-Muslims think of jihad is as the struggle of the sword, sometimes called holy war. And it should be mentioned that the jihad of the sword has been used as a justification for armed struggle, though most of the time this rationale is much closer to what we might think of as just war theory. Does it mean that it has never been used as a way of spreading Islam? No, but it is not as common as one might think. The jihad of the tongue has been much more common. Unless you think that Islam simply conquered and dominated its way to prominence, it should be pointed out that Islam's spread eastward was mostly done via commerce or persuasion. In fact, some of these converted populations would then move westward and assume control. Being upright is seen as submitting to the will of Allah, which can be discerned via the Quran, the 5 pillars acting as a sort of summary, and in the context of the Ummah. The Ummah would include that tradition which has been handed down from the Hadith. Muslims maintain that one's actions have eternal and personal consequences. The result of this would be what some Christians might call acting for a godly, righteous, and sober life. As such, there are prohibitions against things that would lead to dissipation, such as alcohol or gambling. There is also a demand to respect the struggle of others, to live a life of submission to Allah. As such, things that would violate somebody else's struggle, for instance, murder, adultery, or theft, are also prohibited. Some practical imperatives include the absolute obligation to the poor, seeing justice as absolute, which is to say, no toleration for conditions that harm human beings. The notion of compassion, which should be distinguished from pity, in that compassion means that you are open to yourself and to others in how you feel, that you make yourself vulnerable to the other. From this follows honesty and sincerity, then kindness, and gender equality. It also sees the family as a holy estate. It is a social contract with divine sanction. Now, the mention of gender equality in the context of Islam might raise some eyebrows, and as such, we will be looking at gender equality in greater detail later.